Thank you at Sen Sanders for featuring our board member at Kalana Kimo and centering the leadership of #AIDS, activists of color in the fight for health care for all.
Very glad to do so. Healthcare is a human right.
Well, what does that mean? Welcome to Keith Knight, Don't Tread on Anyone. I want to look at positive rights. So when Bernie says, every American, regardless of income, is entitled to the right to a decent job. Decent. That is so subjective. You want the state telling us what decent is? This lying, theft-funded Congress telling us what's decent? Job that pays a living wage. So if you get paid below a living wage and you're alive, does that make it a living wage all of a sudden? If you're doing an internship that gets paid $0 an hour, but you're living off savings or living with your parents still, is that not a living wage? It assumes if you're against a living wage, you want people to die. A right to quality healthcare. Oh, that's what government's known for, producing quality. Let's get them involved. A right to complete education as opposed to incomplete education. Michelangelo said, I'm still learning. Or whoever said it. I don't know. It's probably a fake quote. But the smartest people ever realize that education is never complete. But, of course, by keeping these terms so vague, you can always justify more government intervention. Is this person's education complete? Do they know pretty much everything there is to know? Of course not. That's why government needs to intervene more. This is not quality. We need government to intervene. This job is not decent. This is not a living wage. Government gets to intervene again and again and again. A right to affordable housing. Define affordable. A right to clean environment. Well, thankfully, the environment is much cleaner because people innovate, they invest, they risk their capital with trying to get new products, which is why our environment's cleaner today than it was in past centuries and even decades, because we're using cleaner products that are more efficient and more cost-effective. The right to a secure retirement. So end the Federal Reserve, which prints money, devaluing the savings accounts of people who save. Yeah. A secure retirement. Yeah. So let's take right to education as an example of positive rights and the implications. The right to education has been recognized. Oh, see, it's been claimed, it's been recognized. It's just a fact. Like you're recognizing something that's obviously there. They're not making a claim, they're not making arguments, they're just recognizing reality. As a human right in a number of international conventions, including the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, which recognizes a right to free, compulsory primary education for all. So, a right to free education that they force you to attend. First of all, it's not free. It's funded by taxpayers. I think healthcare, I think education should be free. So the teachers don't get paid, so the assistants don't get paid, so books don't cost money, so buildings don't cost money to build. Well, no, of course not. They're taking the money from the taxpayer. So to say it's free is to completely lie. It's like saying, well, this house was free. I mean, yeah, I took out a loan and I'll pay for it at a different time, but it's free. No one's taking money out of my pocket right now while I'm occupying the house. That's a lie. And compulsory. Ugh. So if you have the right to compulse, quote, education on others, then any YouTuber that engages in education has the right to force you to fund them and force you to watch their videos and force you to read their articles because we have to make education compulsory. And what if you are uneducated and your rights are being violated? Does government go to jail if they don't? Who is violating your rights? Which person or group do you have a claim against? There has to be an aggressor and a victim in order to recognize what a right is and how to operate in a society. Compulsory primary education for all. An obligation to develop secondary education. See, the first primary education they gave you was so crappy, they got to do more. There has to be secondary. Accessible to all. On particular, by the progressive. Ooh, it's progressive. So if you're against this, you're against progress. You want to bring us back to the Dark Ages if you oppose violence by the state. Introduction of free secondary education. Now, if I have the right to education, that means I get to steal money from peaceful people so long as I spend a portion of it on educating myself or others. Because I have a right to it, and by you not giving me the money that you have, you're violating my rights, so you're really a criminal. As well as an obligation to develop equitable access to higher education, ideally by progressive introduction of free higher education. Today, almost 70 million children across the world are prevented from going to school each day. Oh, and they don't face bullying and psycho teachers that make you feel insecure and try to trick you into answering questions. Oh, Bobby wasn't listening. Let's call on him and embarrass him. Well, kids hate school for the most part. Lucky them. As of 2015, 164 states were parties to the covenant. So I'm not just picking on Bernie or AOC. This is a big thing that people believe in, this ridiculous notion of positive rights. The right to education also includes a responsibility to provide basic education for individuals who have not completed primary education from the school and college levels. In addition to these access to education provisions, the right to education encompasses obligations of the students to avoid discrimination at all levels of the educational system. So there won't be discriminating when government, when the world government's in control of education, or even just the federal government. So a number of your teachers are going to be promoting libertarianism, explaining why free trade is good, explaining the non-aggression principle, because they wouldn't discriminate. There's not going to be a disproportionate numbers of leftists in academia if the government gets involved in education, because they're really against discriminating against one group. They're not just going to say, oh, America took the land from the Indians, or America is bad for slavery. They'll really go into how slavery existed throughout all of history, because they're against discrimination, obviously. It's too ridiculous. So the international legal basis, a right to education, is reflected. Oh, see, they recognized it over here. It has been recognized. There's no debate. We're just recognizing reality. And here, a right to education is reflected in, it's not claimed, it's not that some people believe in, it's reflected in this totally legitimate Article 26 Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Articles 13 and 14 of blah, blah, blah. It states, everyone has the right to education. I get to take anyone's money so long as I spend some of it on education. If you don't educate me or fund my education, you're violating my rights, and I get to take your money, and the cops get to cage you and shoot you if you resist. That's what this is saying. Education shall be free, so if you want to charge me for it, then you're evil. See, the people providing the good, if they don't provide it at $0.00 cost, then they're violating my rights. Well, something can be free and of poor quality. At least in the elementary and fundamental stages. The article goes on to say, elementary education shall be compulsory. How is this not news? I mean, I know we got to worry about, Jussie Smollett, getting attacked, and, Trump's involved in Russia, and he's a Putin puppet, and, just hate crimes are everywhere. I know those totally legitimate things are of concern, but when one group of people at the International Universal Declaration of Human Rights, International Covenant, is saying they should have the right to force your kids to attend. Imagine if the Koch brothers said, we have the right to force kids to fund Koch brothers schools. People would freak out. It goes on. Education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality. Holy 1984, they want to control your personality, and to the strengthening of respect for human rights. Dunce, you don't even know what a human right is. A right is any action that you're morally justified in taking, insofar as it doesn't initiate violence against a peaceful person. And fundamental freedoms. Oh, they really care about fundamental freedoms. By the way, if you don't fund the schools, we cage you. If you don't send your kids here, we'll cage you. And we'll be separating parents from children. And they're going to teach us about fundamental freedoms. The people who, in the previous sentence, advocated theft, kidnapping, and slavery are going to teach us about freedoms. It shall promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship. You're not very tolerant of people who want to opt out of this educational nonsense. Education. and friendship among all nations, racial or religious groups, and shall further the activities of the United Nations for the maintenance of peace. Parents have a prior right to choose the kind of education that shall be given to their children. The right to education has been reaffirmed. Oh, so we knew it was there. We're just reaffirming it. It's obviously there. We don't need to make any arguments. We're just telling you what reality is. In the 1960 UNESCO Convention Against Discrimination in Education, Julian Huxley would be proud. The 1981 Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, as men are being drafted by the millions to fight wars based on banker lies and propaganda. The 2006 Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and the African Charter on Human Rights for People. Long story short, the UN's going to control education. They believe they know what a right is. They're going to force you to attend, and they're going to force you to fund it. Now, instead of arguing over what the UN's ambitions are, whether they're justified or unjustified, if we know what our rights are and know what a right is not, we don't have to really worry about stuff like this. Social and Economic Bill of Rights, according to the Democratic Socialists of America. This is a philosophy of Elizabeth Warren, Democratic presidential candidate, Bernie Sanders, presidential candidate, and Elizabeth Warren, the most popular congresswoman on the planet. So I'm not just being nitpicky. I got the UN and a major party influential in the U.S. The right to a living wage job. So anyone who doesn't have, we've already gone through this. My point is, this is something big. I'm not being nitpicky. Here's the understanding. Freedom to versus freedom from. A simple analogy makes all liberal political theory collapse. If 100 people were shipwrecked on an island, what would it even mean to say that everyone there has a right to food, or that everyone has a right to healthcare, or a right to a job, or the right to a living wage? If, for example, someone has a right to housing, and housing comes only from the knowledge, skills, and efforts of other people, it means that one person has the right to force another person to build him a house. This is exactly what happens in a larger context when liberals advocate that some people be forcibly robbed via taxation in order to provide benefits for others. The notion that people, by virtue of their mere existence, are entitled to all sorts of things which come into being only as the result of knowledge, of human knowledge and effort, is delusional. The logical result of this supposedly loving and compassionate viewpoint is violence and slavery. Because if one's need entitles him to something, that means it must be forcibly taken from anyone else who has it or can produce it if he will not supply it willingly. Another example of right to versus right from is I think you have a right to health care and a right to education. And by that I mean you have the right to pursue health care, products and services in the healthcare industry without a group of people forcibly stopping you from exchanging. But anyone who supports the FDA or supports OSHA in the business realm, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, they do not believe you have a right to these things. They believe government has a right to say who gets them and who doesn't. If I want to take the risk and put something in my body, my body, my choice, they forget to have that principle on this one. If I have a right to health care, what I really have the right to do is freely exchange healthcare products and services without violent interference from another person or group of persons. This is the exact opposite of the FDA, using the OSHA example.
Now remember to pay your taxes on this lemonade or I'll throw you in a cage.
Of course, he's not saying that, but all of his policies embrace that exact principle. But hey, I have a right to food. Think about a right to food. That doesn't mean I have the right to force you to grow crops and I cage you if you don't produce me enough food until I'm full. Or I have the Channing Tatum body or whatever you want. What it means is I have the right to exchange food or beverages with another person without violent interference. Now, he obviously doesn't believe, or the statists don't believe you have a right to it because they want to violently interfere in these peaceful exchanges. So really, who is against healthcare as a human right or education as a human right? You can't educate kids without a state license. In every major country on the planet, if every major country on the planet can guarantee, guarantee. So if I find people in other countries that don't get health care, that have, quote, socialized medicine, then it's not guaranteed. See, government guaranteeing police doesn't mean you'll always be protected. Government guaranteeing security with the military doesn't mean you'll never get attacked by a foreign nation. So this guarantee is just an absolute lie. If Group X monopolizes this product or service and calls it a guarantee, then everyone automatically has it. How, by giving government control over something, do you increase the quantity available to a larger number of people? No, only by free trade, innovation, lowering costs, increasing production, can more people get health care that they should have the right to access. Can guarantee health care. Everyone else guarantees it, so everyone else has it. There's never been another person because it's guaranteed. To all and achieve better health outcomes while spending less per capita. Please do not tell us that the United States of America cannot do the same. Well, we can do the same. So we have to look at things that are mass produced and that the people most have access to. Things like, clothes, furniture, technology, books, mouses, chairs, fans, all these things that are funded voluntarily, people have a lot of access to because the state is much less, not totally, is much less involved. But whenever government gets involved, it becomes worse. They get involved in college, and the price of college tuition skyrockets radically. Everyone has a right to a home, housing bubble. Everyone has a right to Medicare and Medicaid. We got to take care of the old and the sick, and then we got to regulate it through the FDA. Then those costs skyrocket. So if he cared about everyone having health care, he would be against statism altogether. Really, all I owe you is non-aggression. I owe you only non-aggression. That's what other people owe you. They don't owe you a job, and they're not violating your rights if they don't chip in for something you want. Everyone only owes you the right to self-ownership and property you acquire through voluntary exchange, contract, or original appropriation. Thank you for watching. Keith Knight, don't tread on anyone.